Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Lifting Your Spirit, a monthly broadcast in which we interview people about their spiritual lives and how they support others in lifting their spirits. I'm Ted Jones, a meditation teacher at North Shore Insight Meditation Center. And today, my usual co-host, Joel Grossman, is actually going to be our guest today. Great to have you.
Nice to be here.
In this new role, Joel.
Funny sitting on the other side of the table. Okay.
Our show is based on the following four principles. First, everyone is spiritual. Sometimes we're conscious of our spirituality, sometimes not, but even when not, we still have a spirit. Second, that there are many ways to lift your spirit, not only through religious practices, but also through nature, art, and human relations, service to others, just to name a few. And third, each person's spiritual path is unique and may change in small or large ways over time. And fourth, that it is important to respect your own spiritual journey, trusting that one step naturally leads to another, and to respect other people's unique spiritual journeys, even though they may be very different from your own. We're not here to convince you of any particular approach or method, but rather just to offer you food for thought. Our guest today, Reverend Joel Grossman, is an interfaith minister. He's the director of spiritual services for Constellation Hospice in Newburyport. He also offers spiritual coaching virtually on a donation basis. He has a long history as a mental health counselor and also has a private practice in mental health counseling. So Joel, as you know, we begin each show by asking our guests to kind of share with us their spiritual history, right back as far as you can remember, up to the present day.
All right. You ready for a long story?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. My father's father was Orthodox Jewish. I can remember about 5 years old or so going with him to his synagogue, and it was all very mystical and magical, and didn't know what was going on, but seemed very interesting. My father wasn't particularly close with his dad, so I didn't get to spend time with him doing that kind of thing, but have that memory. My mother's folks were agnostic. The only time they set foot in a synagogue in the United States was for my bar mitzvah, my brother's bar mitzvah. My grandfather came from Latvia, 6 brothers and a sister. He was the one who was chosen to be a rabbi. And when he got free from that, he didn't want anything to do with it. So my mother didn't have a particularly religious upbringing, but my folks were involved in the local synagogue in a more social way and went to high holiday services, things like that. I went to Hebrew school, which was 2 afternoons a week and Saturday services, so 3 days a week. This synagogue was closer to my grandparents' house, so I would stay with them those nights, so 3 nights a week. Got to spend the night with them, and my grandfather would drop me off at work in the morning. So that was kind of a high point. Nice to get out of the house and spend time with them. And was very involved in Hebrew school, social groups, organizations, as well as the learning. Was bar mitzvahed, and then did what they called Hebrew high school, which was going beyond bar mitzvah. and learning to lead services, and went to the only chauffeur factory in the United States in Brooklyn. Chauffeur is a ram's horn that's blown at the high holiday time. We all got to try it out. I did it pretty well. At the next high holidays, I was doing the junior congregation. The guy doing the main congregation wasn't hitting it that day, so I got pulled in to do that. Which was pretty exciting. And I figured when I got to college, I would make some money doing that, and tried it, and I couldn't get it. So that ended that career path. At the age of about 15, 16, starting a new school, high school, a different school, became more socially secure and left the Jewish world. Like I use the expression a hot latkes. A latkes is a potato pancake, like a hot potato. Just wanted to hang out with the football players, basketball players, and be cool. And so that was kind of a strange time. And Jewish fraternity in college, but it was just a hodgepodge of all kinds of people, so it wasn't particularly Jewish. And then, as many in the 60s, 70s Jewish people who were kind of hippie like myself, saw Eastern spirituality. So started exploring that, and a few years later was separated from my wife for the summer and did a lot of spiritual seeking. And by the end of the summer, had 4 different organizations I was considering being disciple in.
Let me interrupt you there,
Sure.
because I just don't want to lose this this thought. You talked about the many people your age who were Jewish developed an interest in Eastern religions, and I'm just struck by that, because in the Vipassana world, where I've spent most of my time as an adult spiritual, the American teachers were Jewish.
Right.
And they went to Asia, and then they came back.
Right.
And so I'm just trying to, what do you think accounts for that? I mean, it's like they're very overrepresented in the
Yes.
sort of Vipassana teaching community.
And the term is Jew booze.
I'll let you say that.
Yeah. What we were presented was pretty old-fashioned, straight, and here was all this meditation, yoga, tai chi, all these interesting things, and we had enough to have a spiritual hunger and interest, but weren't really finding it within the Jewish tradition. So,
Okay, yes.
yeah. So I'll get to how that all came together at some point. So anything else on that?
No,
before I move?
that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay. So spent the summer exploring groups, and there was Western Order Sufis, Pir Vilayat Khan in that world, Satchidananda, one of the first popular guru, Hindu-based. I forget his name, but it was the 15-year-old Maharaji, I think.
I think that was what he was called, Maharaji.
Yeah, and the followers are called Premis, and got interested in that. And Ananda Marga, which was a lesser-known a guru from India who was very social and politically active. He was from Bengal, and because of Indira Gandhi's oppressiveness and he felt mistreatment of the Bengali province, was advocating the secession of Bengal from India. And every time Indira Gandhi called an emergency state, she would lock up all the Amargis and trumped-up murder charge had the guru in jail for 5 years. I was very impressed by the political along with the socioeconomic and the spiritual of that organization. And everything was free. A lot of these other groups, you had to pay for the retreats and the teachings and fundraising. None of that in Nanda Marga. So that was the one I chose. And it was a very special time in my life where I felt like I couldn't go wrong. Whichever one I choose was fine, and that's not like me. I really debate, I go to buy a pencil, well, this one has this, and that one has that, and 3 cents difference. Not in this case. It was like, just grab one and go. So for 5 years, I was very involved in Ananda Marga and weekly meditations and retreats and things like that. But I couldn't accept the guru as my master. And, in Judaism, one of the main principles is no intermediary, direct connection to God for every individual. A rabbi, the term actually means teacher. He's not spiritually higher than anybody else. He knows more. So it was just hard for me to give myself to the guru. I respected him, did get a chance to meet him, went on a retreat after he got out of jail to Kingston, Jamaica, and got a private audience there. But I left. And then for a couple of years I was kind of lost. I didn't know what my spiritual path was going to be. And I was at an Omega retreat. Omega is a center for many years now in Rhinebeck, New York. First part of the summer is personal growth and spiritual development, multiple sessions at a time, and you go to one and can try out some others. And the last couple of weeks are the arts. A very, very wonderful place. And I went for biofeedback training and met a couple who were talking about something I hadn't heard about, New Age Judaism, which is now called Jewish Renewal. A rabbi coming out of Eastern Europe, escaping from the Holocaust, who was Hasidic, which is a sect of Judaism that's originally created as a more mystical, less intellectual approach, a lot of joy with the lifting of the chair for the weddings and the singing and dancing and all that. That's Hasidic. But modernizing it, so neo-Hasidic, and incorporating meditation, yoga, and all these kinds of things from a Jewish perspective. He was doing this, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, because he was seeing all these young Jews going Eastern. He said, you don't have to go Eastern, it's here. And very attractive. And first time I was with him was at the Message of the Abode in New Lebanon, New York, the Sufi, and on the mountaintop they had encampments, and they made it available to other organizations to use. I walk in, and they're singing the main Jewish prayer, Shema, to the tune of Home on the Ranch. And I go, wow, that's different. So I got very attractive and spent a lot of time in Jewish Renewal, and that's still what more I identify with. I used to go into Boston to that group's meetings, but I got involved eventually after moving to Newburyport in the local synagogue and became president at one point, and that's where I'm still very involved and active. But my own practice and orientation is Jewish Renewal.
Could you talk a little bit about that practice? Joel and I are good personal friends, so you've told me about it, but for our audience, just kind of what the sort of flavor, character of it for you at this point is in your life? How that, both in terms of kind of method, but also how it informs all your life.
Yeah, sure. About Jewish renewal in particular, I used to go to a retreat center in Accord, New York called, I'm blocking the name right now, spent time with Solomon there, did a 2-year spiritual direction training program. It was the first Jewish spiritual direction training program, and other retreats there. My practice is a little bit of a sidelight of that. A rabbi, died early, Orthodox, but got very interested in meditation, Arya Kaplan, wrote a book, Jewish Meditation. Also wrote a book, Meditation and the Torah, Meditation and Kabbalah, 2 different books. So he got seriously into this. He wasn't Jewish renewal, he was Orthodox, what's called modern Orthodox, which isn't the Hasidic, not the very heavy Orthodox, but still Orthodox. And in the book, he had a chapter on this central prayer, the Shema, and another chapter on the pinnacle of the Jewish service, the most meditative part. It's done in silence, called the Amidah. And he broke it down word by word, phrase by phrase. And so my practice each morning is putting on talis, prayer shawl, and tefillin, in English called phylacteries. One goes on the arm, and there's a leather strap that goes around the forearm and the hand, and one on the third eye, the forehead. And do the Shema and the Amidah broken down, word by word, reflecting on what it really means to me each morning. So that's form-wise, practice-wise. And what it really does for me is it speaks to how I want to be in the world. It's a reminder of my beliefs and way I want to interact and be a spiritual, caring person in the world. So that's the form it takes. I go to our synagogue every Saturday for the services, which is conservative oriented. In Judaism, there's 3 major denominations: Reform, which is on the lighter side, Conservative, which is the middle way, and Orthodox, which is heavy. So conservative has a very different meaning in Jewish. It just means the middle way. Yeah.
One of the things that has always been interesting to me is that you and I had known each other for quite a few years, and that at a certain point I found out that my uncle, Thomas Keating, who was a great spiritual inspiration in my life, and Zalman Schachter, who was a great inspiration to you, not only knew each other, but were actually great friends. And there are videos of them together on YouTube. And that one of the things that brought them together was a passion for interspiritual dialogue. And that I see that reflected in your sort of career path of becoming an interfaith minister. And maybe you can sort of kind of pick up that thread.
Yeah. While identifying and being involved in the Jewish world, I was always interested, some from the Hindu experience, but I was just open to the various ways people lift their spirit. That's the name of the show. And when I started thinking, maybe I'll be a rabbi, and took some courses at Hebrew College Graduate School in biblical Hebrew, and I'm not good at languages. I'm terrible at French in high school. I struggled with the biblical Hebrew learning. I can read Hebrew well, I can pronounce it. I don't know the translations. And I realized I'm not going this way. It wasn't just the Hebrew learning. It was my interests and views are much broader. Mm-hmm. I should say that I also got involved in meditation, particularly studying mindfulness-based Jon Kabat-Zinn's approach and becoming a teacher of that and teaching it. I was leading workshops on prayer to anybody, not just Jewish people. So I wanted something broader. I was working at UMass Boston as a health educator. My specialty in my counseling practice was stress management, so that led to that field. And we went to the first national conference on spirituality in higher education and offered a couple of workshops. And I met there people who were college spiritual directors, not the chaplain, but the overseer of the different chaplains on campus and spiritual life on the campus. Said, that's what I want to do. I was bringing in as much spirituality in my job as health educator as I could. Daily meditations, weekly yoga, had a Tai Chi teacher, things like that. So I decided I'll get training as an interfaith minister, not knowing what was out there. I figured there's got to be something. And started asking people, and nobody knew of anything like that. And 6 months later, a friend of a friend who was at that conference, it was at Wellesley, sent me a brochure. And I opened up the brochure, Interfaith Seminary, and the director of the brochure is somebody I knew from psychosynthesis training, a spiritually based psychology that I practiced at the time. And I guess this is it. It was out in California. It was, at the time, a 14-month program. Now it's a 2-year program where you go out and spend a week and then come back and do some work and go out again. And that worked great. Became an interfaith minister, which means serving people whatever they believe or don't believe. Because we all have a spirit, as you suggested in the opening comment. So even an atheist, I can serve. Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about what the curriculum was like, and we'll get later to the organization that you helped found in Maine, Chaplaincy Institute of Maine, but just kind of what do people learn as they become interfaith ministers, and how is it presented?
Yeah, well, you learn a little bit about the different religions. I say a little because it would take a lifetime to go into any religion and really learn much about it. I'm still, trying to find my way through Judaism. It's been throughout my life. You also learn about other ways that lift the spirit, the arts, service. Everybody does volunteer work the first year in some organization, and the second year an internship in some organization. So you get firsthand working with people. Clowning, you name it, is a part of the experience you have. And then the main piece is that it's not just all online. You meet with your fellow class members, because chaplaincy is working with people. And so you get to deal with people for a 2-year period, and things that come up. And so that's a big part of it, just the interaction with the other students. And they come in from every imaginable interest and orientation, including, we've had some atheists in the program who want to serve people and lift their spirits. Yeah. So it's a 2-year, 1 night a week, 1 week in a month program.
This is Chime.
This is Chime.
Okay, and maybe just to backtrack a little bit about the birth of Chime, how that all started. I mean, you were out in California. You were ordained
the second of the interfaith seminaries. The first one was the New Seminary in Long Island. A rabbi from Eastern Europe, coming out of the Holocaust, felt like we need better understanding. We need to, work with a range of people. And so that got it all started. And then Chaplaincy Institute in California, it was originally called Chaplaincy Institute for the Arts and Interfaith Ministry. Now it's just called Chaplaincy Institute. And then a fellow that was in the program with me, Jacob Watson from Portland, Maine, we come back, we're ordained, and we found 3 other people from other seminaries, there was 5 at this point, to form the Interfaith Ministers of New England, 5 or 6 of us meeting. And at one point, Jacob says, I'd like to start one here. And so we got involved with him, and one of the really exciting things was 2 people on the founding board were prospective students. So their input of what they were looking for and what would help them, along with us who had an experience in an interfaith seminary, formed Chaplaincy Institute of Maine. And after a few years, due to Anna Smolowitz, a known name in town, theater director, many other things, actress, she was in the program, and it was 1 night a week in Portland and 1 week in the month. And it was pretty arduous to go up every week, drive to Portland. So I said, well, maybe we could have the 1 night a week in Massachusetts. So found the space in Amesbury, and for 7 years, I led the Massachusetts campus, people from Boston, and then they would do the 1 week in a month up in Maine. And I'm still on faculty there and teach a bit.
So how long has it been going overall?
20 years.
20 years. So
20
it's really well established at this point.
We kind of ran out after a while for Massachusetts, but it's still go. I mean, there's people who are traveling up to Portland. Yeah. So that's that. And then after being ordained and leaving UMass Boston and spending a couple of years, as you did, with a fellow from Newburyport, Dennis Eigen, running a transitional alcohol and drug treatment program at Addison Gilbert in Gloucester, and very much enjoying doing that. But I wanted to do the chaplaincy work. And in my internship at Beverly Hospital, I found that I didn't want to go near death and dying. And so I knew I had to grow in that area, and took the volunteer training program, what was called Hospice of North Shore Hospice. It's now Care Dimensions. And finished the training, was about to be assigned, and a person who was a chaplain there heard that I had been ordained and said, we need a per diem chaplain. Would you be interested? And the way it came about, which is a whole nother long story I won't go into now, it felt just divinely guided that this was the time. So even though I was pretty anxious about it, I said, okay, let's give it a try. And that was 20 years ago, and I'm still doing it. So it worked out quite well.
That is really interesting what you said about divinely guided, because you can sort of see the different places, you know, like getting the brochure in the mail and just the coincidence, you know, what are often called coincidences
Synergy.
can be very meaningful, and for me, I think that I just think more of their little glimpses into an underlying layer of reality that's mostly hidden from view for us.
Yeah. So bringing it more up to present day, I'll say this show, when I was working at an employment agency in Hartford, Connecticut, and underground radio was popular at the time, FM, which had only been classical, and now this new rock and roll stuff, I said, boy, I'd love to have a show. I went to the director of one of the local radio stations. I presented the idea. He thought it was great. I was all excited. He talked to the owner, and he's, nah, that'll never work. And so there was this, you know, interest in doing something in media. And then this idea came up about, hey, you know, you could do something here in Newburyport. I live in West Newbury, and they told me that I couldn't have a show unless I had a Newburyport person. And this great guy, Ted Jones, very spiritual, I said, would you be interested? And here we are. 20 or this 21st shows later?
I think something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. Mm-hmm. So I want to return to your work as a hospice chaplain, going back to that sense of discomfort with death when you were in a hospital, which I can relate to very strongly myself. At different times in my life, I had really around 30. Apparently, that comes up for a lot of people. It came up for me, and I just kind of staggered around with it, you know, going and weeping at graves and cemeteries for people I didn't even know. I mean, that it was a very powerful period of my life of trying to come to terms somehow with death and dying, and that it has, you know, continued to be something that I've tried to keep in mind. There's a spiritual author, Carlos Castaneda, very popular during the 1970s, and his initial works were about, and people don't know whether it was fiction or how much was true or whatever, but his connection with a Yaqui Mexican spiritual master named Don Juan. Don Juan used to speak about always having death over your left shoulder.
Yeah.
That to guide you in terms of what was really important in life, in whatever moment you were in. So if you could speak a little bit about that fears you had about death, and then that also sort of how has it been being with death a lot as a chaplain, hospice chaplain?
Well, as opposed to you being affected by it, personally, emotionally, I had just always stayed away from it. I can't remember my grandparents' funerals, I know I was there. I know I said something, but I just, kind of shied away.
Sort of an avoidance.
Avoidance, yeah. So when it came time that here I am in a hospital and there's people who were dying, it was just that same feeling of, I don't want to go there. So being in the volunteer training program, getting a little more input, a little more discussion about it, it started to feel not quite so scary. And then when the invitation came, and as I say, it's a whole long thing about how that came about. I interviewed with this woman's husband, and it just felt like, wow, I guess I'm being directed here. So I give it a try. And very soon thereafter, it didn't feel scary. It just felt like a wonderful opportunity to be of service at a very important time.
Yes.
I did have an experience pretty powerful previous to this. In the late 80s, I led a spiritual support group for people infected and affected by AIDS. And in 14 months, we lost 5 people in the group. So the group was continually dealing with mourning and grief and what's going to happen to other members of the group, and providing a lot of support to people dealing with that. So it wasn't totally foreign, but it just feels like a very blessed opportunity to be able to be with people. A lot of the people have dementia, or because of their illness aren't really too conversant. It's not like we're having deep theological discussions about death and afterlife. Occasionally that happens. But just the main thing that's the job of a chaplain, I learned in what's called CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education, is the National Chaplaincy Internship Program. That the role of a chaplain is to provide presence and divine love. So just being with people and doing anything that will lift their spirit at a hard time, a scary time. For some, not all. Occasionally people are really at peace, which is lovely, but... And there's a term, good death, or not so good death. I don't use that term at all. I say there's more comfortable deaths, less comfortable deaths, but there's no right or wrong, good or bad deaths. We live the way we live, we die the way we die. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who broke open the fields, struggled a lot, even though she had a great understanding and promoted people to face death. It just plays out the way it plays out. And so to be of support feels like a great gift.
Yes. And just to be with someone at the end of their life is such a gift.
It is.
And that's wonderful that you have maintained that for 20 years
20 years.
at this point.
Yeah. It's a surprise to me.
A truly noble calling,
Thank you.
in my view.
That one and the other one that felt pretty noble, I haven't gone back to it in quite a while, but working in prisons. That was another opportunity in a hard situation to bring some light. I had to learn very early on that people may return. It's not like, you're going to fix the situation. So it's bringing in some light and just honoring that. So I worked at, out of graduate school, Concord Prison in a program for heroin addicts, and then with Project RAP in Beverly, where I was the jail counselor, Salem Jail, and then my chaplaincy program, the Interfaith Seminary internship, was at the Middleton Jail. Yeah.
Wow, so that's quite a lot of experience.
I did 3 bits, I say.
That's right. So we at the beginning we talked about the different ways in which spirit can be lifted, and here we talked about formal spiritual practice, certainly service to others, big through line in your life.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on one more that I know is important to you, which is music.
Singing.
Yeah. And how that has enriched your spirituality and what you've brought to others through that.
Well, what Ted is referring to is for 7 years I was in a gospel choir.
But more than that, more than that. When I've heard you, the shofar and the other types of music that are in different spiritual services, you're quite knowledgeable about some of that.
I've had a lot of experience.
A lot of experience, which
right.
we can focus down into the choir, but I want you to touch on the whole spectrum, because I think it's very valuable.
Well, I'll start with my first involvement in a choir and music was in the Coast Guard boot camp, which I was trying to do anything I could to make it manageable. And so I tried out for the Catholic Protestant choir, Vesper choir, first Jew ever in that. And then he excused us, says, because I got to try out the band. So I went up to him, I said, I played accordion for 5 years, I can read music, you need a bass drum player, a cymbal player? No, I got that. I could use a bells player. So I thought it was the triangle. I said, sure, I'll do that. So he said, I'll get it for you. It was the glockenspiel. So I was the boot camp band glockenspiel player. And in the choir.
And maybe explain exactly what the glockenspiel is. I mean,
the glockenspiel used to be a thing shaped where I'm radio, we can't show it, but it's in a holster that you wear a belt around, and there's a place you put the prong at the bottom, and you hold it in the back with one hand and hit it with the other hand as you march along. It's a marching instrument. Yeah. They don't use the old system that I just described. They use a xylophone straight across.
Right, okay.
And there's a belt that holds the xylophone in place, and you can use both hands. That's the glockenspiel. Look it up on YouTube. Even looking up on YouTube, they show the xylophone now, but if you keep searching, you'll see the glockenspiel. Then at Omega, I did a week with Issei Barnwell, who was the bass singer in Sweet Honey in the Rock. So we did spirituals, feminist, whole range of spiritual-related music, gospel. Then I joined the choir at UMass Boston, both the classical choir, and High Point was doing Verdi's Requiem, but also the gospel choir. Small group, mostly black people. I was one of a couple of white people. And then the one I spent 7 years in, Rock My Soul in South Berwick, Maine, all white, a couple of black early on, but eventually all white. But we did black gospel as best we could. That was quite uplifting. The spirit that I left with each evening from that music was incredible. And then the synagogue choir. And as I've shared with you, and I think you were referring to, about 95% of the service in Judaism is sung. A whole variety of tunes. So a lot of singing involved in the practice.
Yeah, it's particularly interesting to me because when I was getting confirmed as a Catholic growing up, there was some singing in that service. I was informed that I should just sing in my heart. So
I love to sing for patients too.
Yeah, well,
that.
you know, it's like I grew up, I think, with sort of handicapped or you know, not really ever able to find expression in song, and you know, too self-conscious even to try after, you know, the sister had given me that directive. But you know, from you, I've learned, and it's been reinforced by other people who talk about. I'm in a Buddhist Christian discussion group, and people who spent a long time practicing Vipassana meditation, you know, coming back to more to Christian services, and part of it is just there's singing in it, and that I'm appreciating more, even if I'm just listening to it, that there really is some kind of spiritual power in there.
Yeah. Well,
And
any creative expression opens you up to spirit.
Yes.
And this is a particularly enjoyable one, but art and writing, and it doesn't have to be participatory even. Viewing, going to a movie, reading a book, watching a good television show, you know, also helps.
So we're getting toward the end of our time here. Any areas of your life that we've missed over that you think you want to be sure to touch on here?
Oh, I'm sure there's lots, but it feels like we covered a lot of ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we always end with sort of a last word, kind of a advice to people on how that they can lift their spirit.
Yeah. Well, I say that we can put on spiritual lenses, you know? And what I mean by that is an experience we're having, simple experience, just think about it as something that is spiritual. So you can walk down the street and you could enjoy having fresh air and getting exercise. You can look at the beauty of a tree or flowers. Or, you can feel good about getting to the store and buying the supplies that you need. I mean, there's various ways of experience walking down the street. But you can also walk down the street and say, I'm having a spiritual experience. And it will just speak to you. It'll inform you about spiritual life in some very small, maybe some larger way. And so we're talking about perception, and there's an expression, perception is everything, and that usually means surface, no real meat, just, you know, how it looks. But we can also say perception is everything in the way we perceive an experience and just putting a spiritual view on it. And so I just encourage people to try it out. You're getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth. What's spiritually about this? I'm alive, and I got teeth. So.
Well, that is really beautiful, Joel. It's the infusion of our spirituality into our whole lives. It's not just something that happens on the meditation cushion or in a pew in the church or the synagogue, but it's something that's always with us.
Yeah, we're always spiritual. We have a body, we have a mind, we have emotions, and we have a spirit.
Wonderful way to end it, Joel. Thank you so much for being the guest today in honor of your upcoming 80th birthday.
Yeah.
And thank you all who have tuned in to watch this, and we'll see you again next month.